What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Viz Mystic channel, and welcome to the first video in a series of videos that's all about shadow work. Now, shadow work is easily one of the most powerful tools for stepping into your power, changing the course of your life, for retraining your subconscious mind, and for ultimately improving your ability to manifest the reality that you desire. Now, like many spiritual topics out there, the subject of shadow work has sometimes been misinterpreted. It has sometimes been exaggerated. It has sometimes been sensationalized. And this can cause some people out there to get the wrong impression about what shadow work really is and what it's all about. And in some cases, it can even cause people to be completely turned off by the very idea of shadow work. It can cause some people to literally be afraid of doing shadow work, which unfortunately means those people miss out on the massive benefits that shadow work provides. And that's why in this video, I want to give you the most honest, the most down-to-earth, the most realistic introduction to shadow work. What shadows actually are, where shadows come from, and why this work is so important. Then in the next video, we'll go into how you can get the most out of your shadow work journey. So stay tuned for that. Definitely get subscribed. And then following that video will be a deeper video going into how shadow work ultimately impacts your ability to manifest. So a very powerful introductory series to shadow work. For those of you that are coming to this video from the Viz Mystic Shadow Work app, I truly hope that this video and this video series helps you to get the most out of your shadow work journey. But really, regardless of how you came across this video, my question is, will you be one of the many people out there who continue living through their shadows, continue holding back their full potential? Or will you be one of the few people out there who face their shadows and truly step into their power? So let's start things off with what shadow work actually is. Now, when you put those two words together, it's already going to give a negative first impression. All right, when you think of the word shadow, that's typically associated with something negative, something dark, something spooky, right? Something evil. And when you think of the word work, 9 times out of 10, people don't typically enjoy their work. Work is like a chore. Work is something that you have to do to get by. It's a necessary evil. So when you put those two words together, it's no wonder people aren't super excited by the idea of shadow work. But if shadow work is not associated with something that's evil or dark, and if it's not meant to be unpleasant, it's not meant to be a chore, then what really is it? At the core, shadow work is a highly introspective process in which you examine yourself from various angles, various degrees and perspectives, which then allows you to expose aspects of yourself that would normally remain hidden, aspects of yourself that you suppress, aspects of yourself that are based on false beliefs, false limitations. Now, these shadows can have various impacts on your life, but ultimately, they hold back your potential. They prevent you from fully showing up, and they encourage self-sabotaging behavior. So really, shadow work is not something that is evil, and it's not something that's meant to be unpleasant. This is something that helps you to gain a higher level of self-awareness. Now, when it comes to the ultimate goal of shadow work, I've heard many people say that it's about integrating the shadow, and I do agree with that. However, I also think that's kind of getting ahead of the curve. Not every shadow needs to be integrated. So in my opinion, the true goal of shadow work is to trigger a series of self-realizations. And through these self-realizations, shadows will naturally be exposed. Now, how you deal with these shadows depends on the type of shadow it is. I like to think of soft shadows and hard shadows. So a soft shadow might be something that can be completely eliminated altogether. You get to regain that light. Whereas a hard shadow, those would be the ones where the ultimate goal might be to integrate it in a healthy way. Now, I've mentioned soft shadows and hard shadows, and I'll go into this in a second. Reason being, in order to really get the most out of your shadow work journey, I think it is important to have a deep understanding of what shadows actually are. An understanding that goes beyond the general definition of shadows being these aspects of you that are based on false narratives and aspects of you that are hidden or suppressed. That's definitely a good definition, but the deeper you understand it, the more you'll get out of it. Now, to really help you understand what shadows are in a deeper way, think of it like this. All of us, at our core as human beings, are beings of pure light. And the mechanics of light is, of course, to project outwards. Now, as human beings, we come into this material, this third-dimensional reality. And through doing that, we end up developing an ego. Now, in a lot of spiritual conscious conversations, the ego is sometimes thought of as the enemy. It's sometimes given a bad name, bad reputation. But for the sake of this video, I want you to slightly reframe your idea of the ego. In this video, we're going to call the ego your light filter. So your light filter surrounds this pure light that is within you. And that light filter disrupts how your light gets projected onto this canvas that we call reality. Now, this light filter disrupts your pure light in a few different ways. The first way is no disruption at all. There's areas in the light filter where that pure light is able to pass through uninterrupted. And you can think of these as aspects of yourself where your very core nature at your deepest level comes through. And it comes through regardless of how you grew up or what you've been through. These are aspects of yourself that are truly connected to your true core highest self. Now, the second part of this light filter is areas where the light passes through in a diffused way. So for example, you have blue glass in places on the light filter. So as the light passes through, you get a blue projection onto the canvas. And you can think of these as areas of yourself where that pure aspect of you is passing through, but it has been impacted by your upbringing, by your experiences, not in a negative way, but just in a way that changes how that light is expressed. Now, from there, we get to the shadow elements, these areas of the light filter that cast shadows. Now, the first, as we mentioned before, is soft shadows. You can think of these as areas of your life that are built on false beliefs, false narratives, things that people told you that you adopted as your own. And so as you go through, again, this series of self-realizations, and you naturally expose those shadows, you have the ability to very easily remove those shadows and reclaim that light for yourself. It may take time, but as you have that self-awareness and you catch yourself in these behavior patterns, eventually it can be completely removed. Now, lastly, we have the hard shadows, the shadows that are much more core to your nature, the shadows that come from deep and early childhood, deep traumatic or negative events. They come from certain genetic inheritances. So an example of that might be people out there who have an addictive personality. And obviously that can manifest in very negative ways. However, as you again go through these realizations and you shine a light on that shadow, you realize you have this addictive nature. It is something that's in your genetic code. It's been passed down to you, but you can, through awareness, reframe it into something that pushes you forward rather than holding you back. A lot of the very successful people out there have an addictive personality, but they figured out how to use that addictive personality to drive them towards success rather than driving them towards their own demise. So as you go through this shadow work journey, you're basically turning this light filter in all directions from an outside perspective, from a higher perspective, so that you can see how things are projecting onto this canvas. And then you can make the distinction between what is a soft shadow and what's a hard shadow, what can be removed and what can be integrated. And therefore, by doing that, you now have control over how you are projecting yourself. I really can't stress how powerful that is, to have the ability consciously to have the awareness of how you are projecting yourself out into this canvas. The majority of people out there really do not know themselves. It's a sad fact. The majority of people out there truly don't know themselves. That's why the majority of people out there continually look for echo chambers and for groups to belong to, so that those people can tell them who they are. When you do this type of shadow work, I suppose one of the elements of it that is somewhat scary is to truly have the freedom to decide for yourself who you are. So now that we have a deeper understanding of what shadows actually are, now it's important to understand where shadows actually come from and why it's important to do this work. Now, obviously, shadow work is going to be vastly different for each and every one of us because all of us have had vastly different experiences. Shadow work is very individualistic. But in general, shadows come from the very human process of adapting to the world around us. Sometimes we hide our true feelings or our true nature to fit in. Other times we pick up fears, false beliefs, and insecurities from our environment. In some ways, these shadows are almost like a psychological survival instinct. These shadow elements that you adopted were things that you thought were necessary to get you through a certain period or a certain situation in your life. And in some cases, they may actually have been necessary. You do have people out there that live in certain environments, certain countries, that are in certain relationships or certain situations where, for example, fully expressing themselves would put them in danger. And so they have learned to automatically suppress themselves. The issue is when they get out of that situation and they're in a healthy situation, they still have that subconscious tendency to suppress themselves. It goes so deep that that nature of suppression is something that they don't even realize they're doing until they do this shadow work, until they have that self-realization. Then they can realize that this suppressive aspect of themselves is not really part of themselves. It's something that needs to be worked out, something that needs to be evicted from their being, so that they can have the true freedom of expression. In other cases, the birth of that shadow may not have been as extreme. This could have come from something that happened in early childhood, where one day you were just a bit too loud, having too much fun, and on that particular day, one of your parents had something that they really needed to get done, and they needed peace and quiet, and they overreacted, and they told you to be quiet in a way that hit you so hard that you, from that point forward, suppressed yourself. And now years go by, you're well into your adulthood, and that moment from when you were 7 years old is still causing you to hold back your expression. You've also got people out there who went through very traumatic events. You have people who grew up in very toxic or very chaotic environments. People out there who have dealt with bullying, both in person and digitally. People who have come from very high control groups or high control religious groups. And in all of these cases, shadows will naturally be born. And as these people hopefully leave these circumstances and get to a better place in life, those shadows are going to be following them. When it comes to adopting false beliefs, you have many people out there that have grown up in very poor households. And so as a child, they've seen their parents go through money issues. They've seen their parents struggle. They learned a scarcity mindset. And through all of that, they gain a negative relationship with money. And so now, as they go on in their life, they keep holding themselves back in terms of their abundance. And so they keep themselves in a place where they're struggling, because struggling feels normal. And really, that's another aspect of where shadows come from. It really comes from things that you have considered to be normal that are really not normal. Perhaps they're not right at all. These are distortions in your reality that you have gotten so used to that you consider them to be normal. And so therefore, you act out in a way as if these things are normal. You hold yourself back in certain ways because you consider these situations to be normal. And therefore, a shadow gets born. Now, again, where shadows come from is a very individualistic question. But at the end of the day, the fact is, not a single one of us had a perfect upbringing. Not a single one of us had perfect parents or perfect guardians. They tried their best with what they had, with what they knew. Not a single one of us has been so lucky to go through life without ever coming in contact with someone who is negative, or someone who is an asshole, or someone who wants to put us down. And eventually, again, through adapting to our environment, eventually all of us are going to adopt certain beliefs that get us through a certain time, but that we continue to carry with us. And as we continue to carry it with us, it holds us down. It holds us back. And regardless of where these things come from, this is why it's important to do this shadow work. Because so many people out there continue living through beliefs and through false narratives that hold them back. So at this point, I think it's really important to go through some warnings related to shadow work. These are things that you should really keep in mind so that you can have the most positive, the most helpful shadow work experience. So the first thing you want to keep in mind is to never become overly dependent on anything that's outside of yourself. Shadow work is truly one of those things where all of the answers are within. You really do not need anything that's outside of you. And I'm saying this as someone who has done shadow work coaching and who has co-developed the shadow work app. And even I'm saying these things are not necessarily a necessity. Any shadow work app or journal or coach out there, all they're really doing is being a guide. That's the most they can do, is just simply be a guide. The answers are within you. It can shine a light into certain dark corners, but it's you that has to do the deep work. It's you that has to find those answers. Now, furthermore, no journal or app or any source can fully capture every shadow because we're all so different. So nobody out there can design something that covers everything for everybody. When the Viz Mystic Shadow Work app first came out, it had just over 300 shadow work journaling exercises. It now has almost 500 through the various updates. Even if it was double that, over 1,000, there would still be areas that would not be covered. For every door that it guides you to open, there will always be doors in between those doors that it simply doesn't bring up. It's up to you to find the places in between the spaces that are unique to yourself. So again, you don't want to become overly reliant on anything that is external to you. And just to really prove this to you that you don't need anything outside of yourself, here's a very easy way that you can do shadow work anywhere without having anything. So the first thing you're going to do is simply take just 5 minutes. That's all you really need. 3 to 5 minutes to reach a point of being neutral. So do 5 minutes of breath work, do 5 minutes of meditation. Just get yourself to that neutral state. Now, once you reach that neutral state, you're going to maintain a high level of self-awareness as you go about your day. And as you encounter certain situations or interact with certain people that cause you to leave that neutral state, in particular, if it causes you to go towards a downward negative state of being, those are the things that you're going to pay more attention to. And you're going to go into that self-examination to ask yourself why these things that are external to you have such a big impact on your internal being. This is fully you diving into yourself, you simply being aware of where you are energetically. And definitely beware of any of these opportunists out there who say that you need their coaching, their mentorship, their app, their this, their that, in order to be successful in this work. Those people are lying to you, and they are trying to divert some of your personal power over to them. And I would be very, very weary of anybody who has that intention. Now, the second thing that you want to keep in mind when doing shadow work is do not make shadow work into a self-hate, self-judging, self-critical session. We'll talk more about this in the second video, but it's very important to say here. Shadow work is not about magnifying your faults. Shadow work is all about coming to a point of loving yourself and understanding yourself more. In shadow work, you are removing the elements that no longer serve you so that you can push yourself into your fullest potential and realize aspects of yourself and talents and passions that you don't even realize is there. Shadow work is really about magnifying that light. It's about realizing just how beautiful you are. And trust me, you probably don't even know how beautiful you are. So again, we'll talk more about this in the second video, but it's very important to say, just because shadow work, when done improperly, can turn into a self-judging, self-critical, self-hate session. And if it does start to turn into that, that's when you know you're doing something wrong. Now, lastly, the third thing that you should keep in mind with shadow work is that shadow work is never done. Shadow work is something that you want to continue to do throughout your life, especially as you come to certain parts in your life where you are either experiencing something new, going into a new stage, or breaking through a previous ceiling. Now, we've covered a whole lot already, but hopefully you can see why I say that shadow work is so powerful. In fact, I would say that shadow work might be one of the most powerful spiritual tools that are out there. Meditation has fantastic benefits, but in order to realize those benefits, you have to do meditation over an extended period of time. Breath work has fantastic benefits, but in order to realize those benefits, you have to keep practicing breath work. You have to expand the full capacity of your lungs to get the full benefits out of it. Shadow work, all you really have to do is ask yourself the right questions. Then you have those self-realizations. And through those self-realizations, you can begin to make immediate changes in your life. And that's why it's one of my favorite tools, not only because it's so powerful, but also because you can start gaining positive effects from it almost right away. All it takes is asking yourself the right questions. So again, no matter how you came across this video, and if you are brand new to shadow work, or even if you've known about shadow work for a while now, I hope that this video series gives an accurate depiction of what shadow work actually is and how it can help you. So with that, I want to say thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for your valuable time. Please stay tuned for more videos. Get subscribed so you're notified when they've dropped. Hit the like button if you found this video helpful. Share it with those who you think might benefit from it. And I will catch you in the next video, part 2.